my parents would be a little bit slow getting us there, so we'd have to turn up late and sort of be in our sort of normal cheap clothes from second-hand shops and things like that. So it was always very much on my mind that the rest of the family was better off than us. So there was always a sort of inferiority complex with that. And I think that, if we have these sort of experiences as children, as I'm sure Adam will attest to as well, it can cause these beliefs to start within our life very early on. And we start to gain a mindset of poverty and scarcity. So, yeah, is that the thing on? Are you up and running, Adam? Could you hear me okay? And
yeah, you're coming through loud and clear. How's my volume coming for you?
Yeah, it's perfect here for me.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, just to kind of give my thoughts on kind of setting the stall of today's topic, manifesting wealth, prosperity, and abundance. For me, I find this topic fascinating. In terms of how people think about money has always been fascinating for me, but also how emotive it is as well. Like there are so many kind of triggers and kind of different perspectives. And of course, like a lot of this stuff comes from childhood. So today we're going to be looking at all elements of wealth, prosperity, and abundance, not just financial wealth, but I would say an attitude of abundance comes in many different forms outside of monetary wealth. Possibilities, opportunities, all these things, can be linked to abundance and its opposite, which is scarcity, of course. And of course, we've got that word there, manifesting as well, which has got connotations with law of attraction. This idea of how you create things, and you can look at the word manifestation and manifesting in a very kind of woo-woo and spiritual way of, if you vibrate at a particular frequency and just want it enough, then you attract these things to you. Or you can look at it in a very pragmatic way and say, well, manifesting is just creating. And therefore, if you have an idea and you turn that idea into a business or a product or some kind of revenue stream, that's manifesting as well. So we can look at it in all contexts of the word. But effectively today, we're going to be talking about what can you do inside your conscious, subconscious to attract more of what you want, which for me is what prosperity is. It doesn't have to be monetary things. Myself and Rowan were talking just before we went live that actually you can have a lot of financial wealth and still be poor if you're sick and have no gratitude for what you have. That's equally possible. So it is a way, I think, of looking at the world more so than how many zeros you have in your bank account. And we'll be looking at all these things. And of course, this is a conversation, not a seminar. So if you have got any questions, if you've got any experiences, anecdotes, really strong opinions on any of these points, raise your hand. We'll get you up on stage. We want you to be as involved in this as we are. And the room's growing. I can see we've got 11 people there, 12 people there. If you know anyone that you think is a good example of someone with an abundance mindset, there should be a little plus button at the bottom of the screen. Maybe ping 2 or 3 people in that you think has got something really interesting to say on this, and would love to hear their thoughts. Would be great to have them involved in this as well. But equally, if you've got something to say, raise your hand. We'll get you up on stage. Rowan, what does wealth mean to you?
I think wealth to me is abundance. It doesn't really matter whether we're looking at wealth in your health or wealth in money or wealth in any area of your life. Really, it's about being abundant. It's about having enough to be comfortable and do the things that you want to do in whatever area it happens to be. I don't know if that resonates with you, but that seems to be my sort of understanding of wealth from my perspective.
I very much, prosperity and abundance, I think is a bit different. For me, I do look at wealth in terms of monetary wealth or financial wealth. And for me, the opposite of wealth is poverty. And for me, why wealth is such an important thing is that my core value, my number one value is freedom. And I think that when people are in poverty, they have less choices, which is the opposite of freedom. They, more often than not, if they don't have enough. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for example, having security, having a roof over your head, having food, you don't have to go back too much time in history to see that a lot of people that ended up, hung or imprisoned or were deported to Australia were people that were stealing for their very survival. So I think that when people are in poverty, generally they do things out of necessity rather than, let's say, more aspirational motives. And when people are willing to sacrifice on their integrity, then generally it creates a cause and effect reaction that normally detracts from the quality of their lives. So for me, wealth is having sufficient financial resources to be able to live life on your terms, whatever that means for you. Now, for some people, that might be traveling the world. For other people, it might be having a massive house and expensive cars. It doesn't really matter what it is. Wealth for me is having sufficient resources to live life on your terms. And that's how I define it for myself as well.
Excellent. There's a quote by Wallace D. Wattles in his little book on the science of getting rich that sort of, we were talking about this before we came on, that he says the whole process of getting in tune with universal law, Wattles says, can be summed up in one word: gratitude. He observes that many people who order their lives rightly in all other ways are kept in poverty by their lack of gratitude. The grateful mind is constantly fixed upon the best, therefore it tends to become the best. It takes the form of or character of the best and will receive the best. So I think this side of it, if you are grateful for everything you've got, whether that's a learning or a gift, whether it's the wealth that you've got or the struggles that you have to go through to grow in life, it starts to get you into that mindset where you are attracting what you want. And my personal opinion on this is it's the reticular activation system kicking in again, isn't it? So I think when we look at the world that way, whether it's wealth in monetary terms, or someone that's got an abundance of food in olden days would be considered wealthy. Before we had the monetary system and we were collecting shells to trade for things, wealth was about being able to feed your community, really, wasn't it? So I think it is this ability to be free and do what you want to do in your life, whatever that may be. Have you worked much with people on wealth? I know you've done quite a few little audios for your podcast and stuff on manifesting wealth through hypnosis. So I don't know what your views are on the whole idea of going straight in there and trying to create abundance and money through hypnosis.
Yeah, I guess the short answer to that is loads of stuff. I think for two reasons. One, it's definitely an area of interest and almost like a passion of mine, weirdly. But it might be worth giving a bit of context to explain why, for me, this kind of fusion of kind of hypnosis and wealth or financial freedom, however you want to call it, is of interest. And it sounds a little bit similar to you, Rowan, in the sense that I grew up not in a poor family by any stretch of the imagination, but in a family where at the age of, I think I was about 10 or 11, my dad decided to go back to university. He basically went straight into employment at the age of kind of 18, married very young, had a young family. And then when he was in his 30s, decided to go back to university to study economics. And what that meant for the household of me at those kind of teenage years where kind of status and kind of what trainers you have and what bike you have are like really important to your kind of almost like the perception and your social standing within school. Suddenly the income dropped massively in that house. And because of that, I linked a lot of shame at some level or embarrassment, dare I say it, humiliation. I used to bike to school and my trousers would rip in the cycle chain, and having ripped trousers and kind of very, poor quality clothing, and that kind of stuff. I already had this kind of inferiority complex, this kind of feelings of not being good enough. And at some level, the monetary side of that amplified those feelings of not being good enough and not being valued, not being important. And at that age, I had, sufficient self-awareness to know I didn't like this feeling. and I had a motive to try and solve it. And I remember wanting a computer, anyone old enough to know kind of the old computers. I wanted an Amiga 500 at the age of kind of 13 years old. And I asked my parents for it, and they didn't have the money for it. So they said, yeah, of course you can. You just got to go out and earn it. And for me, the only thing I could really do at that age was a paper round. So what it really taught me is, one, financial situation is only a temporary reflection of your status at any one point in time. And I kind of learned that fairly early, but equally, I learned that the value of money is very much proportionate to how hard you've got to work to get it, and then what you do with it. And for me at that young age, having to wake up at like 6 o'clock in the morning, go out in the rain and the snow to do paper rounds, believe it or not, Rowan, I used to get paid £4 a week. I'm in my, approaching mid 40s now. Even then, that was a rip off. Like, I was waking up at crack of dawn, horrible weather, about an hour doing this paper round for £4 a week. And what it taught me is that money is valuable only if you treat it with value. So that's where my background came from. And then, what it helped me to do, because I had to work so hard for so little, is to get quite creative and resourceful about making money. And I became quite entrepreneurial even in my teenage years, because I knew that I didn't have what I wanted. And I also knew that I could try and change that if I did certain things. So that's where my early interest, and I think I fell into the trap that a lot of people fall into when they chase money. And that is the get rich quick schemes seem to be this kind of answer to all your problems. If you can just kind of get this money quickly. So to begin with, I was chasing the money rather than focusing on creating value for other people. And I think a lot of people, have made that same mistake. But there is this kind of premise, this presupposition that, particularly if you're a very, insecure teenage boy, that money will solve your problems and it will give you that kind of validation, that status, that respect that maybe you're not getting in other ways, particularly if you have, fairly limiting belief systems. So yeah, absolutely, Rowan. I do a lot on money and kind of mindset related things now, but it came from me not really feeling worthy, partly by not having sufficient compared to my friends, my kind of peers at school. And I think that's probably where that kind of interest came from, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, totally. And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I've certainly found that those presuppositions that we have in the language of our parents and the learning that we get from them has a big impact on whether we think we're even worthy of money, or whether we want money on a deep unconscious level. So things like the money's the root of all evil, or money makes the world go round, or this idea that you need to work hard to be a success in life, and things like that. And while they're sort of true on one level, they're not at the same time. If you have this idea that you need to work hard to be a success, yes, you do, but at the same time, you can work smart and be a success instead of working hard to be a success. So just find that a lot of those presuppositions that come through in clients are really one of the major blocks for them manifesting anything, whether it's wealth, prosperity, abundance.
Yeah, I do. I think scarcity is one of those key things, and risk is another thing that comes up. I think a lot of people, I think money is one of the main causes of arguments. So if you grew up in a house where your parents are screaming at each other based on money, then at some level you're linking emotion to that particular area. So a lot of people, will get into debt and they won't read their bills. So I think that's an issue. Money for some people is linked to maths, and a lot of people have negative associations with maths at school. So, I'm constantly surprised at how many people just don't understand the basics of compounding or interest rates and things like that. And you can look at these payday loan companies with their 1,000% APRs, and you think, who in their right mind would take out a payday loan and do something like that, it's a couple of people, desperate people, and people that don't understand that they are allowing the fundamental principles of compounding to keep them in poverty rather than make them rich. So I think ignorance is one of these key ingredients as well. But when people talk about money blocks, what we're really talking about is belief systems. And some of those belief systems are related to the idea that because you have to work so hard for it, therefore it's an elusive thing. And, that is a false, a bit of false logic there. Yes, you can work really hard for money, but just because you work hard for money doesn't mean that it's difficult to create. And for me, the experience that I had fairly young, I think I was about 14 years old, but I was, like I say, it would take, I had 4 paper rounds, each paying me £4 a week. So it was £20 a week that I was making. I was working hard, like we're talking hours, on really early, and then back from school, cycling around my town to do that. So I was working like loads and loads of hours for £20 a week. So I had evidence that you do have to work hard to make money. But then interestingly, I had this experience where one of my neighbors, again, revealing my age here, was selling a VHS recorder. And I went to enough car boot sales to have a rough idea of what something was worth and if it was cheap or not. And she said she was selling it. I said, how much are you selling it for? And she kind of shrugged her shoulders and said, oh, £30. I said, okay. And I was saving my money for my paper round there. So I bought it from her. Within half an hour, I took it back to a family barbecue, literally across the road. And my uncle bought it from me, not because it's kind of like he was doing me a charitable favor, but he actually needed one. And I think he bought it from me for £70. And then in half an hour, I'd made the equivalent of 2 weeks of working my ass off in the space of half an hour. And that taught me a lesson that, yeah, you can work hard for money, but there are other ways of making money, such as buying something cheap, selling it for more. And then at that point, I became kind of addicted to going to car boot sales and getting an eye for where the value is and who I could sell it to at a higher price. And then once you have those kind of references for a different belief system that, yeah, working hard for money is one way, but equally so is looking for bargains or taking risks. And there are other ways of doing it. That gives you a different belief system. But if you didn't have that experience, if I didn't have that experience of stumbling across something of some value and then being positively rewarded by that at a higher price so quickly soon after, maybe I wouldn't have the belief system that I have right now. So, there are these things that happen. But what I say to people, and I did a hypnosis session with someone that had a very firm belief system that you have to work hard to make money. And that's the only way. You have to work hard. And I did a time machine metaphor with him where I said, well, look, let's say, and I said to him, have you ever gambled on the horses? Have you ever, gambled in a casino? And he had. So I said, right, well, just imagine you had a time machine. And instead of gambling on the horses or gambling in the casino, let's just say that back in 2009, you heard about this thing called Bitcoin and you decided to have a gamble on Bitcoin and you bought a bit of Bitcoin for maybe a few £100s, treating it like a gamble. You completely forgot about it. And then lo and behold, kind of 13 years later, you're now a millionaire. How hard did you have to work to get that money? And he was like, well, I didn't have to work hard at all. And it's like, so what did you have to do if it wasn't working hard? And effectively, it was risk some of his capital. And most people, I think, that grew up in very working class families and things like that, their only frame of reference for making money is either earning it or potentially, and there's lots of environments where, we've all had experiences where people would steal something from us. And we had this conversation before, Rowan. If you grew up in a family where if you saved money, one of your siblings or someone would just take it from you, you're going to learn pretty quick. It doesn't make sense to save, spend what you've got. So if you've got these different references, you're going to have completely different, a mindset and kind of attitudes and kind of positively reinforced behaviors. And when you think like that, rarely do you change it unless there is some kind of intervention. So, I think in fact, all of us are, we're out in the world, playing out these kind of belief systems that we didn't pick and choose. We didn't pick and choose them, for, I would say 90% of the population. We're just we're executing the belief systems that we've accidentally stumbled across by a bit of, social conditioning. That's what our parents did. That's what we heard. That's the people that we respected or admired. This is the things we got rewarded for, punished for. All these kind of things, conditioned us to kind of act the way that we are. And for a lot of people, they've got more debt than they have assets. They have to be in a job, even if they hate it, to pay the bills. And a lot of people are trapped because of the way that they think about money, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like for my life, I didn't get any debt at all until I was in my late 20s, early 30s. It was the first time I got a credit card and actually started using credit to sort of manage my finances. But I was already working in finance at that point, and I was making a decent amount of money. So looking at my belief system and my brother's belief system, he's a trained engineer, and he's got this poverty mindset where he has to scrimp and save everything. And he really, like, you can see him, he'll spend hours and hours or days or months trying to save a little bit here and there. And he's spending his time to save money instead of spending a little bit of money to save time. And when I got the chest infection that sort of gave me a kick up the backside, shall we say, from the universe to sort of make some shifts and changes in my life and really look at my belief systems, I went from being homeless, penniless, and terminally ill to owning my own house and running a business that was turning over about 60, 70,000 a year in the space of 6 months. And that shift and change was purely to do with, I'd realized that I'd shut down my immune system effectively by negative self-talk at that point when I got ill. And I was like, okay, I'm going to use all this stuff that I've been learning in hypnosis and NLP and start to apply it to my life properly in the way that I should have been in the first place. And I turned my life around in 6 months and bought the house that I'm living in now. But one of the ways that I did that was looking at how much money I'd put into other people's mortgages by renting properties. And that gave me the leverage, that gave me the shift to go, no, I'm gonna have a bit of hardship just now and really scrimp and save and make sure I can get the money together for a deposit. But it was all positive self-talk. It was all like doing self-hypnosis and auto-suggestion that got me through all that, and potentially actually saved my life at that point, because I was dealing with a severe respiratory disease and going back into an office job where it was getting into autumn and everyone was like coughing and spluttering around me with flus, and I didn't get anything. I was completely healthy for that whole period, and I've had very few, touch wood, infections since then. And I think it's because I keep my mental state in such a good place most of the time. There is always days where you're feeling a little bit less than you would normally, but you just look at it. And, Bob said to me, I just watch it, in that sort of space. If you're feeling a little bit down, you just watch it and go, I wonder how long this is going to last, and pull yourself back out of it. So I think working with rapport with the unconscious, really, that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's about knowing how to speak to your unconscious in a way that gives you the ability to start to tune it into getting what you want from life. So we have this, I think all problems really in therapy are to do with this lack of rapport. The unconscious mind just gets us what we want, and it thinks that we want what we're focusing on. So if we're focusing on something negative, it's just going to try and get us more of that, as far as I can see anyway. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, and if anyone else has got anything that they sort of want to talk about on this as well.
Yeah, definitely raise your hand. Yeah, if you've got any thoughts, points like why do we think the way that we think when it comes to money? I personally think that childhood is, as it is with most belief systems, where a lot of people kind of create the framework that their future life kind of pans out. But equally, I think with parents, people tend to either model them or rebel against them at some level. Rarely is it kind of somewhere in between. It tends to be one of the two. But I would certainly agree with that element of, the feeling that people have, attracts more of that thing. And although I was a bit of a saver and I kind of dabbled in kind of, these kind of investments and buying and selling and things as a teenage years, I've mentioned a few times on here, but when I left home to go to university for the first time, I had such severe social anxiety. I became a recluse, and I was just focusing on all the negatives, real victimhood, this happened to me, this isn't fair, and that kind of stuff. My health deteriorated, I had no money. I remember, back then you get a loaf of bread from Tesco's from like 13p. They decided it was kind of like a loss leader to get people in the store. But for me, this kind of Tesco no frills bread was kind of like a lifesaver, just to kind of give me something. And like Tesco value, like, and, rice pudding and things like that. So, back then when, I was focusing on all the problems and the opposite of gratitude, I was resentful. I was entitled. I should have this. Why don't I have this? This isn't fair. Meant I had less. And I was adding to my anxiety. A lot of my social anxiety was because I was second guessing all of the things that people were going to be thinking about me. And of course that changed my physiology and effectively meant, that I didn't want to leave where I was. And then of course you don't get fresh air, you don't move very much, your health gets even worse, and it becomes a cycle. One of the key things that I found really useful for me is that once I figured out that I could change some of these beliefs and really take responsibility and a bit of ownership of my life, I was then able to much more be able to influence my emotional state. And I think a lot of people are worried about things like, if you look at the overwhelming ways that people make money, okay, very few people do it from paid employment. Very few people do it from that way, because the tax system doesn't reward people to earn the majority of their money through your PAYE. That you can get high flying footballers, you hear about them, and lawyers and people in the banking system, but very few people make a lot of money from that. The main way that people make money and real wealth is in assets, and typically the asset is the property that they own, which appreciates over time generally, or it's businesses. And both of those things are associated at some level with risk. And to give you an idea of how ingrained this kind of fear of loss and fear of risk was for me, when I graduated at the age of 21, back then, different banking system, back then they were offering 105% mortgages. This is where you could not only get all you needed no deposit whatsoever. They'd give you 5% extra on whatever the value of the property was for you to kind of like just have, like, invest, they were giving you more mortgages. And I remember being offered 105% mortgage, finding a property that I could have easily turned into, at least I would live there, not pay rent, and have 2 rooms that I could rent out for 60K in Luton at the time. And I remember thinking, but what if the prices go down? What if and it's kind of like, what kind of an idiot was I? But it was so ingrained in me, this idea of, I could lose and loss and all this kind of stuff. On paper, 105% mortgage, where the mortgage is secured against the value of the property. How do I lose in that situation? And also I didn't know about cash flow or yields or, the lodger allowance, so that money's tax-free and all this kind of stuff. All I needed was a sheet of paper, and I could figure out how much income was going to come in from tenants, how much my mortgage was, what I would need to do to pay that. And it was a no-brainer. And yet I didn't. I could have got that property when I was 21. My first property I ever got was actually at 26 years old, which was highly risky. But the difference then was that I'd rewired my brain to kind of have a different attitude to risk. So I think it's such an emotive thing. And one quick anecdote before we really insist on people coming up on stage and kind of sharing their thoughts. When I was about 14, 15 years old, I remember having a walk on a beach. We were having a summer thing. It was a really windy, like gray skies, not a pleasant walk on the beach, but really windy. And I was walking with my dad, and it was kind of like one of those kind of father-son moments. And he was kind of asking me what I wanted to do. And I was saying, I think I want to get involved in business and run my own business. And his reaction to that, apart from hugely disappointed, was this element of fear. He threw 2 stats at me straight away. He's like, you do know that, 50% of businesses fail in the first year and like 90% fail in the first 4 or 5 years, and here I am, this impressionable, kind of 14, 15-year-old. It's like, oh shit, that sounds a bit risky. And so I said to him, well, what do you recommend? And then, of course, like he shared his blueprint of the world, and he was like, well, actually, if you know about finance, if you know about, if you look at number 2 or number 3 in most big companies, are kind of the financial director, really learn about finance and you'll be okay. But I could see a guy who, didn't seem to be very free and was always stressing about what he had to do at work and those kind of things. So, his view of the world is that business was risky. My view of the world is that business is one of the best ways to be in control of your own destiny, because you make the decisions rather than other people. Same thing, different belief systems create an entirely different framework of decision making. Steve, good to see you up on the stage.
Good evening. How you doing?
Very well indeed, Steve. What's your thoughts or question or point?
Well, I'm just sort of looking at the title here, manifesting wealth, prosperity, and abundance. I mean, what is wealth? What is prosperity? What is abundance? And just looking at this from I suppose what you might call an anthropological perspective, looking back thousands and thousands of years ago, what drove certain people to achieve more? And I think it's really it's the search for stability. Because if you've got a surplus, you've got something which you can put by should the crop fail, should it be a bad winter, the emergency situation. And if you've got a surplus, you can trade, you can swap what you have for something else. And I think these days we tend to put money into that, but money itself is not wealth. Money's just an avatar. It's got no inherent value of it in and of itself. Well, I suppose you could burn it if you were really cold. Just because you have a lot of money, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're better off. I mean, there was plenty of millionaires in terms of rubles or lira a few years ago. It doesn't mean a thing, really. So I think that's the first thing I'd sort of like to get across. What was the other thing I was saying? It's funny the attitudes that we have to money over time. I mean, in a previous life, I used to be in direct sales, and in the solar industry in 2011, lots of us did very, very well indeed, to the point where I was seriously considering spending £850 a month on a brand new Aston Martin. And I wouldn't dream of that now, but I actually consider myself to be more wealthy now in terms of my time and my lifestyle than I did back then. And and I've got a fraction of the money I had then.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Stephen. And wealth, I think, is subjective to the person. It's their own definition. While it might represent security to those kind of farmers of kind of centuries ago, that might equally represent status to one of those same farmers. And by having the biggest farm and the most surplus stock, it means that they get a slightly bigger cart than everyone else that represents the Aston Martin that you desired. Or whatever it is that kind of motivates them. So I think, the fascinating thing about money and wealth is that, you're right, it has no inherent value other than the utility of that, what it can be used to do. And for some people, it can give time. For some people, it can give choices. For some people, it can give status. For some people, significance. For some people, control, all these different things. So money really, I think, reflects the value system of the individual that holds it. And it is fascinating to see how people that have a primary value of safety and security, which quite often is a reflection of their childhood. If it was a volatile environment, then and you have to kind of move from one rental property to another rental property every 6 months. Owning your own home and money representing security, or seeing the struggle of a parent like lose their job and seeing the emotive, power, people build identities around their profession, and seeing someone lose their job, can be, very crushing for that person. And therefore, what do you learn from that? And that is that jobs represent security. So I do think that money is one of these things, and wealth is one of these things that represent or replicate or mirror the values of the individual that hold it. I also have a belief about money is that it amplifies the kind of character of an individual. So a greedy person becomes more greedy, a selfish person becomes more selfish, a generous person becomes more generous. I think at some level money doesn't make someone good or bad, but it amplifies their character, is one of my belief systems. But one of the things that I found a useful framework in terms of wealth for me and my goal of freedom is this idea of surplus, kind of resources. And that is that if you, there was a saying that I heard, the average person is kind of like 2 months paycheck away from being homeless on the street and that kind of stuff. And this idea of having passive income that you don't have to work, so that if you lose your job and you don't have any income, if you've got sufficient passive income coming in, that means that you never have to go back to a job. For me, that was financial freedom. Having, positive cash flow that came from assets rather than employment, for me means ultimate freedom. So I was very fortunate that I had some of these assets that appreciated in value, generated a positive cash flow, so that now, I run a PR company, I do clinical hypnotherapy, but I don't have to do that. And I think it gives you a very different energy if you do things out of choice than if you do things because you have to do it. And there are so many people that do jobs they fucking hate they work for people they fucking hate, and they have to because they feel that, if they don't, it represents a lack of security and a lack of those things that they value. And I think what a horrible place to live when you have to do things in, from that perspective. Different if you're fortunate enough to do what a lot of us here do, and that is, work in an area that we love anyway. But still even better if you're still doing it out of choice, that you don't have to do it to pay the bills, but you're doing it from a position of, because you want to, impact other people or learn new things or whatever it might be. So I hope that is useful, Steve. Joanna, I can see you've come up as well. What's your question or thought?
Yeah, I actually just had a conversation right before I got onto Clubhouse about this. One of my neighbors left being a lawyer to pursue being a yoga instructor. And it was interesting because having this conversation, I'm 32, having this conversation with two other people that are in their 60s, you can kind of see how other people shape your ideas of money. But it was very interesting because from my perspective, I just thought, why wouldn't she do that? She can always get another job as a lawyer if she needs to. Whereas the other two people in the conversation were kind of talking about her family's expectations of her being a lawyer, identifying as being a lawyer, more of like this high status job. And yeah, it was just interesting to see how our opinions about, I guess, a job as an identity, but also bringing in money shapes her reality.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. You sort of look at people's careers, and some people are like, I am an actor. And other people will say, I do this for a job. And you can tell from their language whether they identify as being that job or as just having that job. And I sort of look at a very similar way with my own life. I've worked in finance. I know I can always go back into contract. I can go back into finance and do coding work and process stuff if I want to. So I don't have to worry too much if I'm struggling a little bit financially or my businesses aren't going as well as they could be. I can jump in a little 3 months contract and get money back. So you can have these separate streams of income and sort of passive income, or you can have a sort of safety net of knowing that you can do things to make money as and when you want to. And I think, on this idea of wealth, I mean, you said it yourself, Adam, you've got that comfort where you don't have to do this. And I think the wealth, in some respects, really, the whether you're talking about monetary wealth or not, it's this comfort in being able to do what you want to do, and the space of being able to do what you want to do when you want to do it, that comes with wealth. And that can be the wealth of living on a sort of the top of a hill in a hermit's cave with your own little garden, if you want it to be that way, So yeah, I think it's quite interesting seeing these shifts in the way people think about money, especially as they age. It seems to be that people start to get this understanding that actually time is wealth rather than money. So, this comes back to this idea of spend a penny to save a bit of time rather than spending time to save a penny. So I'm all for that idea.
Definitely age plays a role, I think, for sure. But also I find, like, I'm in school for OT, and all of my classmates, they say I am an OT or I am an OT student. But for some reason, it bothered me the whole time I was in the program, because I just don't identify, like, I don't think I don't use that terminology, I guess. I may practice, I may be a student of it, but it's not my identity. So that's kind of another piece too. Like, how much do certain professions identify with their profession, and then it becomes their identity? And so their stream of income is their identity.
I mean, yeah, just to highlight, I mean, here I am calling myself the hypnotist on Clubhouse. So definitely I link that to the identity level, but it certainly isn't my only source of income. And I saw Jessica have a post on Facebook today that, she's a kickboxer, she's a hypnotist. And that was one of my fears about becoming a hypnotherapist while also running a PR company, that, hold on, society says you're meant to be one thing, and actually, is it confusing, or does it show inconsistency or recklessness to kind of have these kind of different things that you do? So I would say absolutely, the reason why I like linking hypnosis at the identity level is because I feel so great when I do it, and I enjoy learning about it and those kind of things. So why not link it to your identity? Although I was running and still run a PR company for coming up to 20 years, I never called myself the publicist because it didn't really resonate with my values in the same way. It didn't really give myself that kind of good feeling. So I don't think it's a problem to kind of take a profession and own it at the identity level, so long as it serves you. And I look at, this is just a form of a belief. It's not if it's good or bad. Is it useful or not? And if it's useful, well, keep it. And if it isn't, we'll reject it and, have something a bit more empowering for you. So, for those people that are human rights lawyers and they have that at the identity level, good for them. We need people like that in the world. But equally, you're going to have people that very much say, well, they'll have it at the behavioral level, or the environmental level. And they'll say, I do this is my source of income. Well, that's also good if that serves them in whichever way they want. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think where it becomes a problem is where people have something at the level of identity and it doesn't make them feel great. And then that kind of becomes a little bit of a trap at that point. And it also, I think the educational system and some of these things, like to be a pilot, for example, or to be a doctor, you've got to get yourself in huge amounts of debt before you even figure out what that role is, and then you've got the added pressure of, family and parents and things like that kind of, they get so much status from, let's say someone's profession in that level. I mean, that's a huge amount of expectation on an individual, not to mention the financial element. If you're in that much debt, you've got to pay that back. So for people to walk away from a profession in that financial dynamic, that's real courage. That's real courage to kind of do that. And I think that's when you really see, I think it's very easy to make a decision if there isn't any kind of consequences involved. Bob, good to see you up here. What was your point?
Hi there, guys. How are you? First of all, disappointed in Joanna when she told me about the lady who stopped being a lawyer to get involved in yoga. I was expecting to hear the story that she was making $500,000 a year. I'm sitting here sobbing into my wine, but that's the way it works, does it? And it's interesting what Joanna said about ageism and what happens within it. I would agree with Joanna in lots of things of what she said, but also I would know lots of people, and I do know people who used to be lawyers, and right now they're doing other things like Reiki and so on and so forth. So I don't think it's a case of the 30s are like that, or the 60s are like this, and so on and so forth. But I hear what she's saying, maybe across the board, on the whole, in general, and where she is on that side of the pond, that's the way it is. But I think we find that certainly the two guys here would agree with me. In the UK, we're getting a lot of people switching off at 50s and going into something else. And the main point I wanted to make was this. I'm probably in here under just a false belief, really. I see that you're calling this manifesting wealth, prosperity, and abundance, something that I'm not highly interested in, if that's okay. The reason why I came into the room was I truly believed that tonight was all about, as I saw in the advert, can you communicate with your subconscious to help you manifest wealth, abundance, and prosperity, which I am interested in, I suppose. Although I think I go on one side of the fence. And I'll happily tell you what side of the fence I'm in right now. I could spend 6, 7, 8 hours happily talking about it, but to put it into a scattered nutshell, I'll give it within 60 seconds. Is that okay? The long term, after decades of looking into this, I think probably no is the answer for me personally. Can you communicate with your subconscious to help you manifest wealth, abundance, and prosperity? I think no. I think it can help you do lots and lots of things, lots of positive actions, but not to get stuff. I don't think the universe is remotely interested in us having stuff, but I think it's only fair that I shut up at that point and give somebody else a chance to argue against me, because I'm sure they have a story also. Is that okay?
Well, I just had a question, Bob. When you say that you can't ask for stuff, what stuff do you mean? Are you talking monetary wealth, or are you talking health?
Well, great. Well done, Joanna. Thank you for that. Yes, you're right. I'm wrong. I'm very, very happy with communicating with the subconscious for a change of health, for something to happen within a body. I have no problem with that. But for monetary stuff, for abundance, not only do I not think it's possible, but apart from that, I find it a vulgar idea. That's not why I think I chose to be born into this world, to get stuff. And even if I could get it, I really wouldn't want it. That's not why I'm here. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, I mean, if I can answer that, Bob, I get that. I mean, there is a materialistic connotation with stuff and having, more than you need, and I think this is why it's so important for it to align with the values of an individual, because there are some people that are in situations that they are feeling stressed or they're feeling pressured. Most of my friends that I know they've got a source of income from employment that isn't really fulfilling in some way. So if they were in a different situation where they had more, let's say, income coming in, that would give them the freedom to make a choice on their lifestyle and how they spend their time on their terms, perhaps to get a point where they could be, a Reiki instructor rather than or doing yoga rather than a lawyer or something like that. I personally think you can make changes at the unconscious level relating to money, because in my experience, quite often it's just one or two like core beliefs, and one of those beliefs might be that they're not worthy of having nice stuff, And if you can change that belief and say, well, actually, you deserve it. And if you work hard and you make a difference in the world, why shouldn't you have nice things like other people have? Well, that can make a change to the quality of their life. A lot of people are making decisions about what to do around money based on belief systems that really don't serve them. One of the patterns that I've seen quite a lot are people that can actually make money quite well, but not hold on to it. And I did a hypnosis session recently where there was a woman like that. And for her, she perceived that holding on to money was somehow selfish and morally wrong. And I did a hypnosis session based on a metaphor of streams going into an empty reservoir. And to begin with, there was a single stream coming in, which represented her single source of income. And I said, well, imagine 2, 3, 4, 5 streams coming into this reservoir, and then obviously she understood that could be different sources of income. And she could see that the reservoir was always empty because it immediately flowed out. But I said, right, just imagine that by this reservoir filling up, it means that if those streams start to run dry, you've got enough for the future. And actually, we imagined this kind of irrigation system coming from the reservoir to actually irrigate a farm to create the kind of abundance that she could then, have an impact on other people. And because that aligned with her value system, for her, it had changed from making excess money as greedy, selfish, just to get stuff, to giving her a sense of security, reducing the stress that she had around money, and actually putting her in a position where she had enough for herself to then overflow and help other people. So I personally believe that because a lot of misery and a lot of lack of integrity comes from the scarcity of money, it stands to reason that if you help people to have a situation where they've got more money, then actually that's going to improve the quality of their life. And I think a lot of people also know, as hypnotherapists, we know that when people are very stressed and anxious, after avoidance, self-medication becomes one of the key coping strategies of that. So if people are worried about money all the time and they're using drink, drugs, and food as a way to cope, well, inadvertently, that does damage their health. And if they were in a different situation where they had, let's say an additional income, which they just haven't thought about because of their belief systems, well, then that means that the amount of stress in their life can go down dramatically to the point that they don't use drink, drugs, or food as a self-medication tool, and therefore the quality of their health also improves. So, I'm glad you brought that point up, Bob, but, I think I would disagree that on that point. Rowan, I saw you just came off mute. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, manifest in itself means clear or obvious to the eye of the mind. And, I think that the way Bob's looking at this is possibly this idea of creating something out of nothing. But the way I look at this is, can we speak to our unconscious mind to make something clear or obvious to the eye of the mind that it becomes possible? So through autosuggestion, through hypnosis, and all of these different ways of speaking to your unconscious, whatever route you decide to go down for that, what you're really trying to do here is to make it clear to the eye of the mind that this is a possibility for you. Whatever that wealth that you're looking for, prosperity, abundance is, whether it's a wealth in food or a wealth in money or a wealth in something else, cars, whatever it happens to be. So when we're looking at it in that way, I think that manifesting wealth, prosperity, and abundance is something that we can do if we can speak to the unconscious mind and help it sort of open up that vision that this is a possibility for us. This is a probability for us. If other people have been able to manifest this in their life, then we can manifest this in our lives. And open up that vision that this is something that we can actually get to, instead of something that's blocked from us, that we don't have the resources or the opportunities in our life to get to. And by looking at manifests in that way, I can see a sort of a difference in how you could interpret what we're talking about here in this room.
Do you want me to come back again?
Yeah, go for it, Bob.
Well, I would totally disagree. The whole idea of using metaphor and analogy to tell a story, as was told there about how to create a farm, to create abundance, to help her to overflow and even help other people. I mean, the only thing that's missing is the unicorn, really. It's not the way it works. It's just not the way it works in any way, shape, or form. But I'm open to really get involved with somebody where we would do something over the period of a day or a week or a month. And a little bit about how I work, Rowan, but there's just no evidence in any way, shape, or form that this has ever happened, other than individual cases that Jimmy got a car. Yeah, he managed to get his Rover by the end of next Friday. He did, but he took out HP. That's how he got it. It didn't work any other way.
I mean, just a quick point there, Bob. If someone has a belief system that they're not worthy of a promotion, and you help give them a feeling of confidence and resourcefulness, so they believe that they are worth it, and they go in for that interview, they get the promotion, their income comes up, does that not affect the quality of their life, potentially reducing stress. No unicorns in that, kind of hypnosis session perhaps, but does that not improve the quality of their life and therefore the abundance they have in their life?
Yes and no. It will help the quality of their life, but not the abundance of their life. It won't give them wealth. It won't give them abundance. It won't give them prosperity. And what will happen there is the working therapist will lead them on by using language such as, you're not worthy, you don't think you can, you feel you're not good enough, you don't deserve it. And the person sitting in the chair will go, oh my God, this person really knows me. That's exactly how I feel. Of course, that's exactly how they feel. That's the way they're there. There's other ways to go around that, but not to promise them any form, in any way, shape or form of wealth or abundance or prosperity. We've got thousands out there who don't attain wealth, abundance and prosperity through hypnotherapy. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I mean, I would disagree with you on that, but I mean, we're entitled to our own belief systems, our own opinions on that. But if that person that had the promotion, income goes up, and also they have different attitudes to debt and those kind of things, then of course they could completely transform their own personal wealth, based on whatever definition they have for it.
Yeah, but you just said if they get that promotion. Now you're being very assumptive of the 60-minute case you've got with them. They come in at 2 o'clock, they're going at 3 o'clock. The assumption is that you're going to give them a promotion by telling them that they're not worthy. That's not the way it works.
I actually used to be really bad at interviews, and I got passed over a couple of times in jobs. And then I started walking in with the presupposition that the interviewers were just checking it to see if I wanted to work with them and if I wanted to work for that company. So I changed the frame of the interview within my own mind, and it allowed me to be more relaxed in those interviews. It allowed me to interview them effectively to see if I wanted to work for them, and notice the subtle shifts in the things that they did and the way they behaved during the interview. So I think that, both of you are completely correct here, but from slightly different perspectives. And I think that, this idea of, let's say, opening a path to wealth, prosperity, and abundance through hypnosis might be a better way of putting this. I think that is completely possible. If we can allow someone to change the way they're looking at an interview, to change the beliefs that they have about themselves. And it may just be that. It may be walking into an interview with a different sort of presupposition as to what's happening in that interview. If you go into that interview and go, look, I don't care about this job. I know I can go in another job. I know I can get another interview for another company, wherever I want. So I'm going to go in and interview them and see if I want to work for them. And the subtle shifts in my body language and the way I spoke to them. One of the first interviews I did this on was at a company in Stirling. And I noticed that at the end of the interview, they asked me if I wanted to see where I would be working. And I was like, no, it's okay. I'll see that when I start. And it was just that subtle shift and see that when I start instead of if I start was enough for them to offer me the job over someone that had 5 years experience doing this job that I had no experience in at all. So I think that, with self-suggestion and with modifying our own belief systems through working with the subconscious mind, although that is a construct in itself, allows us to start to work with these beliefs that we have that are blocking us from opening up that path towards whatever we're looking for, whether it's wealth, prosperity, abundance, health, or anything else.
And by doing that, Rowan, do you believe that you managed to manifest wealth, prosperity and abundance?
I do, yes. I think that shift in my perspective and my presupposition and going into interview had led to me getting offered a lot more jobs than I would have been offered if I hadn't done that. I used this on a number of occasions from that point on, and I started learning how to ask particular questions. Like at the end of an interview, they'll ask you, do you have any questions for us? And my question now is always, yes, do you have any reservations about my ability to do this job? And that brings up all of their limiting beliefs about my abilities so that I can counter those limiting beliefs in that interview. So that shift in my perspective had a marked impact on my success in my finance career.
Steve, I see you back up on stage. What's your thoughts or question?
Hi there. Yeah, it's all Bob's fault again. He said something earlier on, actually, which did resonate with me. Bob, I think if I can quote Bob a little bit, I think he was saying that his outlook on life is that his life is not about accumulating wealth and that sort of thing. I certainly resonate with that. But just to put some framework on this whole conversation is predicated on the assumption that there is such a thing as in the unconscious mind, and secondly, that we have an understanding of it. And that reminded me of something I read a little while ago about an operation called a corpus colosectomy. And this was used as an attempt to remedy extreme epilepsy cases. They'd cut the corpus callosum. And when you address the left or the right hemisphere, possibly by blocking off the left or right hand field of vision, in people who've got split brains as a result of this operation, you can get very, very distinct personalities come out. I think it was maybe one of Roger Spenny's experiments, somebody like that, Wilder Penfield or Roger Spenny, I can't remember. And they had an 18-year-old lad who'd had this operation. And when they addressed one side of his brain, asked him, what he wanted to do with his life, he wanted to be an accountant. When they addressed the other side of his mind, he wanted to be a racing driver. So coming back to Bob's point, maybe there's a part in Bob and me and in all of us perhaps which wants different things to what we think we want. I just wanted to put that thought forward to the board. See what you think.
I think that's a fascinating thing. And I think everyone would, agree that whether you look at it in terms of parts or ego states, or, there's a part of us that wants to kind of get the significance of having a massive impact in the world and is quite driven in that way. And probably another part that wants to spend all day on a beach, just kind of relaxing in the sunshine. So yeah, I think that's true. But I also think it's, for me, the way I look at it, and I get where Bob's coming from on this and I also feel in terms of just this idea of the woo-woo stuff of just like you manifesting abundance just by kind of wanting it all, doing that. I think that's ridiculous, that you can kind of look at a vision board of a Lamborghini and then suddenly it's just going to attract it in your life. I look at this, phrase of manifesting almost the same way that I look at a business plan. And that is, it's the intentions that you want. But you've still got to turn it into the steps required. But I do think that there is this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy linked to beliefs, that if you believe that something is too risky or it's too scary to do, then you're probably not going to do it. And if you believe that you've got the resources to do something, you're more likely to do it. And I see manifesting more in that sense, that you activate the resources required to do what's necessary to create whatever wealth, prosperity and abundance is for an individual. Now, for some people, that might be lots of money. For other people, it might be lots of time. For other people, it might be, the ability to make choices on their term. But fundamentally, that element of the self-fulfilling prophecy from beliefs, well, if you've got limiting beliefs, you're probably going to, not even do the things that could lead to the possibilities, and my early belief that investing in property is too risky. Well, that definitely influenced my belief to buy that first property. More recently, I heard about crypto maybe, 4 or 5 years ago. My initial association is don't understand it, too risky, sounds like a con, sounds like a Ponzi scheme. And of course, like I didn't take any of the actions at that point because of my belief system. So if we do agree that belief systems, unless you're actively thinking about the belief, is in your unconscious, and it's somehow steering the decisions that you make in life, well, it stands to reason that if hypnosis can make changes at the unconscious level regarding anything else, why wouldn't it also be able to make changes at those beliefs that you have about money and decisions and your ability to do things or not do things? For me, it stands to reason it's the same principles, just in a different context.
And all these premises would be correct, of course, if your initial premises were right, but maybe they're wrong. I mean, here we are talking about crypto and property and so on and so forth, where it's a much bigger question we need to be asking. As Steve just said there, all of this has to start somewhere. There has to be an initial premise, an initial belief, something that carries you through life. So for me, I would say it's all chosen by me before I was born. And guess what? I'm okay. I'm both okay now, and I'm going to be okay no matter what happens. Even if my life is shit, compared to infinity, I'm going to be out of this in a nanosecond. So what could possibly be the problem? And now, when we look at wealth and abundance and prosperity, like I said, I find it a vulgar idea. I work as a full-time therapist Monday through Friday, as Rowan knows, and I am riddled with many of my clients in this area who are riddled with wealth and abundance and prosperity. They're absolutely freaking loaded, and they're miserable. It does nothing for their lives in any way, shape, or form, and yet this is the main theme we've got going in our topic tonight. So I would suggest you need to dump this, because I know lots of broke people who are ridiculously happy. They want to manifest something else. What Joanna said earlier, something linked to your health and how you want to feel and what you want to do and what you want to do for other people. That's where the magic happens. But to turn around to this law of attraction, as they would call it, through The Secret of 2004, thinking we get wealth, abundance, and prosperity, it's just a total waste of time. Like I said, you're going to be out of here in a nanosecond from now, and none of that stuff is going to do you any good in any way, shape, or form. It simply cannot.
I think that's a good point. You know, it reminds me of the never-ending story, where you do what happens next with the client, and just see where it goes. And at the end of the day, nothing really matters in our lives here. What really matters is the people that we're with, the people we enjoy this life with, the places we go, the things we get to do in this life. We get to enjoy this material world. You know, whether we're spiritual or not, we're here for a finite amount of time in this body, and enjoying what we do is possibly the best, wealth or prosperity or abundance, really, rather than any monetary gains or physical possessions that we may have. You know, my father was quite good at not really holding on to too many physical possessions. He taught us these beliefs that, you know, if you can't afford to lose something, don't lend it. And if someone steals something from you, then just let it go with love and gratitude, and hope that they enjoy it as much as you did when you had it, because it was never really yours in the first place anyway. You were just a caretaker for a while. So I think that this, you know, from my perspective in this manifesting wealth, prosperity, and abundance, this question is really key. You know, it's one of those questions that opens up that idea as to, you know, what do we really want in our life? Are we really looking for money, or are we really looking for connections? Are we looking for experience and happiness? And I think that that's a really good way of looking at all of this stuff, you know?
I think there is something potentially there with this whole law of attraction thing. I remember when I was a boy, I had pictures of Ferraris and Lamborghinis all over my bedroom wall. But I think because of my parental upbringing, I didn't have a very good attitude to money. And yet later on, I think when I was probably about 21, 22, I ended up working for the racing driver, Nigel Mansell. And I was surrounded by Ferraris. I used to take him up to his house on the Isle of Man. And then a few years later, I was headhunted by a supercar builder down here in Dorset. And my job was to go out and buy top supercars that we'd basically nick all their ideas, we reverse engineer them. And one day they delivered I think it was a 2-month-old Lamborghini, which one was it? Diablo, a purple Diablo, round to my flat. I didn't have anywhere to park the bloody thing. You know, I had this thing for like the whole weekend, and I didn't own them. So I think we when it comes to this, I think we have to be careful what we wish for, and I think we have to be specific for that sort of thing to work. And I think there's so much mumbo jumbo talked around this, but I think in the center of it, I think there is something that seems to go on at a level that, frankly, I just do not understand. But I can see it working in some ways, certainly.
I sort of look at that, you know, I look back on my life as well, the things that I wanted when I was a child and what I wanted to do with my life as a child. And I wanted to help people. And I'm doing that now. You know, I've got my own house. I'm quite happy in the way my life's going. But I think there is this sort of, this manifestation that happens based on what you want through your childhood. And I don't necessarily think that it's some universal law of attraction where the universe is just giving you the gifts of what you want. I think it's really the mind is starting to open up opportunities through the reticular activation system, where it starts to notice the things that will get you towards that goal that you set when you were a little boy. or a little girl. And I really think that that's the sort of power of this law of attraction, if you want to call it that, or manifesting your heart's content or heart's desire. So I think that we do get what we're focusing on. And if we put a lot of energy into focusing on something when we're a little boy or a little girl, then, you know, that's going to be a big part of that inner child's perceived joy in life, and it's going to go for that.
Yeah, I remember one of my very first mentors when I first started evolving, I suppose, as an individual. And I think, if I'm perfectly honest, I evolved fairly late. I could have put my hand up to that. But anyway, this guy said to me, he said, there's really only two important days in anyone's life. In your life, there's really only two important days. That's the day you were born and the day you find out why. And I didn't find out my why until I started this work. And I'm very happy with that.
I think that's fantastic, you know, and I would agree with you. You know, it was my mid-30s when, you know, I kind of figured out that, yeah, this is something I'm meant to be doing a lot more of, and, you know, very grateful for that. And I do think, you know, if we circle back round to some of those kind of beliefs that people have about money, you know, some people do believe that, you know, it's, you know, the root of all evil, or any of these kind of things. And fundamentally, I see it being linked to, if you have negative associations with stuff at some level, you're going to unconsciously repel that. And if you've got positive associations, you're going to, you know, do more of the things that attract it. And I remember growing up in a mining town in Derbyshire, and, you know, there I was walking down the street with my mates, and if a very expensive car went past, you know, the attitude was, look at that dick. You know, or, you know, let's scratch that, you know, and personally, I think that if you have those kind of beliefs or resentment or negativity toward those kind of things, highly unlikely that you're going to, you know, whether you call it manifest or attract or any of those kind of things in your life. I think fundamentally, you know, you can either be, you know, inspired by this kind of stuff, or you could be, you know, kind of resentful for it or ambivalent for it. It doesn't really matter. It's based on the individual value systems. Where there is, I think, a bit of a dissonance is if you do want this kind of stuff, but you resent the people that have it. And I think that's going to create some kind of inner conflict. So, I mean, yeah, each their own. I think we've all got different kind of thoughts on this. We've only got around about 15 minutes left of the show. So if you are in the audience and you have got a question or a point that you want to make, feel free to raise your hand. It'd be good to get your input before we wind down. What's your biggest, let's say, belief change that you've had in your life, Rowan, about money?
I think that, you know, one of the things that I sort of came to a realization about this is, you know, if we had a massive amount of food sitting in our larder, it's going to go off. So we're going to throw a banquet and invite all our friends and have a big dinner party and use up all that food. But with money, which is effectively a paper token for buying food at the end of the day, we store it away for as long as we possibly can and hoard it, you know. And I think one of my beliefs about money is that it's easy to come and it's easy to go. You know, I'll always be able to make more. I'm never gonna have to worry about that sort of side of things because I've got knowledge and I've got skills. So for me, wealth is really the knowledge and skills that allow you to have that comfort and freedom within your life. And I think that was a real turning point for me to sort of let go of the fear of not having money rather than to have a desire for money. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. I mean, effectively, that is a belief about abundance. Whatever happens, you're going to be okay is an abundance-based belief system. The fact that if you lose what you have, you could make it back. That's basically saying that there is plenty of resources within you to access the resources in the world. You know, I think that's also a very useful belief system, but not everyone shares those belief systems. Some people have a belief system that, you know, if they lose the only job they've got, they're fucked. Okay. And if they have that belief, well, then, you know, how much joy are they going to have when they go to work every day? How much abuse do they have to potentially tolerate from their boss because they don't feel that they have any options? You know, and I think, you know, abundance isn't just about how much money that you've got. Sometimes it's about the perceived choices that you have to make and how resourceful you feel. And generally, when you're in these situations where, you know, you can't just say fuck you to your boss, you know, if he's being a dick, you know, then, you know, at some level you're going to be compromising until you're in a situation where you feel that you're trapped. And there's a lot of people deeply unhappy, not just the millionaires, but the people that are on minimum wage that feel they don't have any options. They're also miserable, you know, and I think anything that we can do to make the rich people happier, or, you know, the people that don't have money in a position where they can also be happier, well, that's great. You know, why don't we do more of that kind of stuff?
I had a few people I used to work with at Standard Life, and the company was going through some sort of turbulent times at that particular moment in time. And there was a lot of people that were like actuaries and accountants and things like that, guys with decent wages. And they were all stressing so much about the possibility of maybe being made redundant because there was going to be redundancies. And I was like, look, I mean, you've got skills, you're a qualified accountant, you're a qualified actuary. Like, could you get another job tomorrow if you put your mind to it? And they're all like, yeah. And I'm like, so why are you stressing about this one? You know, do you really love this company that much that you would only really want to work for this company? So you see this all the time, and people are just making themselves miserable because they don't think they've got options when they've got massive options. You know, there's always options. You know, worst case scenario, I'll go and sweep the streets or wash windows or do something to get food on the table and a roof over my head. For me, that's abundance, being able to always know that I can put food on the table and a roof over my head. You know, that makes me happy. Everything else is a plus.
I think it's the perceived options. And if you don't perceive that you've got either other skills or other talents or other things that you can do, well, then that's, you know, that scarcity of options, that scarcity of resources, you know, which for me is the opposite of abundance. And if you feel that you've got lots of things that you can do, so if you weren't doing this, well, it's fine. You've got a plan B and a plan C and a plan D, or you could just kind of do whatever else. That's great. I also think that the reason why sometimes that you've got very wealthy people that are miserable is because perhaps they're not living by their values. They've had to compromise values in a different area, or it may be that they're living beyond their means. You know, and you see time and time again, you know, lottery winners that, you know, they get all this money. But fundamentally, I think whether they keep or don't keep that money is going to be a reflection of their values and their belief systems. If you've got people, you know, and you see it with footballers and 100 grand a week, and then a few years after they finish their professional career, you know, they've got nothing. You know, fundamentally, it's because they're living beyond their means. They don't understand, you know, some of the principles of money and how to make it work for you rather than you working for money. And I think all of these things, it doesn't exist out there in the world. It exists within your own mind, you know, because there are people that are good with money, and there's people that are bad with money, and there's people that, you know, are quite happy, you know, not having very much, but it's probably because they're also not in debt, and they're probably not living beyond their means, and they're probably not compromising their values, doing something they don't want to do. Well, if you've got someone with no money, but feeling that they could do so many different things in the world, and not willing to do something that they're not willing to do, that's also abundance, whether they've got money in the bank or not. I think it's a mentality rather than, you know, how many zeros you have on your bank statement. We've only got around about 10 minutes left. If there is anyone in the audience that wants to share anything, let me know. Equally, if there's anyone up on stage that wants any kind of summaries or final thoughts, love to hear it. Steve.
Yeah, I think really this comes down to the level of identity. This whole thing of abundance, and whether you can manifest it or not, perhaps, is another matter. I was always trained to work on the idea that, you know, we should always have three different models of the world, and I think three different models of who we are as well. So yes, I am a hypnotist. That's how I identify. But more than that, I'm a communicator. I talk to people. I help get things out of them, things, you know, potential that's within them. In order to do that, I have to be a salesman. Now, that's not in the sort of the grubby. I think here in the UK, we have a very low opinion of salespeople. It's almost like it's a bit of a grubby, sleazy profession. In fact, I take the opposite view. I've never sold anything in my life, especially with my hypnosis clients, but I help them sell themselves into the right course of action or therapy for themselves. So those are my three models. I'm a hypnotist, I'm a communicator above all else, and I'm also a salesman. And that's where I get my abundance from.
I think that's a really good way of looking at it. And I think, you know, as hypnotists, we are like, I don't think you can separate those three things, Steve. You know, like we're selling ideas, we're selling the change of it, and we need the communication to be the hypnotist. But breaking it down into those three sort of different models is a really nice way of looking at it. So yeah, I like that.
Fantastic. Well, it is creeping up towards the end of the show. If no one else up on the stage or in the audience wants to share anything else, I guess we could kind of summarize, Rowan. What's your takeaways from today's room?
I think the takeaway that I've got is that, you know, if we look at manifesting from a perspective of the sort of the secret and the law of attraction and that sort of side of things, from my perspective anyway, that doesn't work. You know, I think that we can use the communication with the out of conscious parts of the mind to shift our beliefs, and also like wire up transferable skills within this sort of field where we can start to see that we have more opportunities than we maybe thought we had, and things like that. And that in itself can open up a path towards that idea of wealth, prosperity, and abundance in whatever area there is. Yeah, I think that's about my take on it.
I would echo that. I think the idea that, you know, you can kind of find the right quantum frequency and just kind of manifest millionaire status. And there are people that genuinely believe that if they, you know, put on their vision board that they're going to win the lottery, that they're going to attract that into their life and that will happen. And that's a belief system for some. The reason I don't like those kind of belief systems are that, you know, even if you're in a highly resourceful state that you're going to be a lottery winner, you know, you can't then do anything with that resourceful state. You know, it relies on, you know, things outside the locus of your control. Where I do believe that actually how you think and your belief systems can influence your wealth, prosperity, and abundance is if you fundamentally make different choices, make different decisions. If you know, believe that you can set up that business rather than not. You know, if you believe that you can quit that job and you're still going to be okay, that's abundance. You know, and I think if it helps people to make decisions from a place of abundance, which is the opposite of scarcity, that's not a bad thing. But equally, you know, it is one of these things that I think the moment you start talking about money, people have their emotions. They've got their kind of, you know, views and beliefs on it. And that's why I think it's such an emotive kind of passionate topic. You know, I love learning and doing this kind of stuff. And I think it's an exciting area to look at, particularly when I think those people that are in the opposite of these things, so poverty, scarcity, and lack, generally are less happy than those people that have more of those things. Thank you to everyone that's. Sorry, go on, Ron.
There's a couple of things that come to mind. You know, I think, was it Ford that said, "If you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can't." And I think that's really sort of permanent in this respect. And also, you know, where attention goes, energy floats. So if you're focusing on the negatives and what you can't have, then you're going to get more of that. And I think those two little phrases are something that can really be powerful for getting an understanding of how to do this within your own life and how to open this up within your own life. So I just wanted to add those as well.
I would agree with that. And equally, you know, it's, you know, the great thing about living life, you get to do it on your terms based on your values. So, you know, each to their own is what I say. Thank you to all of us that's joined us up on stage. Really appreciate your time and input. And for those people in the audience, if you have got any suggestions for any future shows or topics, obviously Graham couldn't join us today, but feel free to send us a direct message or use the little aeroplane icon to send us some ideas. Definitely consider that. It's been a pleasure to host alongside Rowan this chat today, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.